Enjoying the podcast? Well, then you just might love the book. City of Nightmares. 500 haunts, killers, and cryptids from across the USA. Uncover America's darkest secrets, one nightmare at a time. From the restless spirits of haunted mansions to the chilling legends of cryptids lurking in the shadows, City of Nightmares is your ultimate guide to 500 spine-tingling locations across all 50 states. Whether you're a seasoned ghost hunter, a true crime aficionado, or simply a thrill seeker in search of your next adventure, this book has everything you need to dive into the eerie unknown. City of Nightmares, now available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. Get your copy today.
Deep within the red rocks and railroad bones of northwestern Arizona lies a stretch of land filled with western folklore and desert silence. But just south of the old mining town of Kingman, past dry washes and forgotten trails, there's a place that locals don't talk about much. A canyon whose name alone stirs unease. I'm your host, Dan David. Welcome to City of Nightmares. Kingman, Arizona sits at the intersection of history, highway, and high desert. Nestled between the Surbit Mountains and the vastness of the Mojave, the town is perhaps best known today as a key stop along historic Route 66. But long before road trippers and roadside diners, Kingman was a hub for cattle ranchers, prospectors, and railroad workers carving out lives in the unforgiving terrain. Founded in the 1880s, the town was named after Louis Kingman, a civil engineer who was instrumental in building the railroad through the area. That rail line, and later the highway, helped turn Kingman into a crucial artery in the American West. Over time, it became a place where industries overlapped: copper mining, cattle herding, and eventually military training during World War II. In fact, the Kingman Army Airfield once trained thousands of gunners for combat, and traces of that era still remain at the local airport and air museum. Yet, for all its infrastructure and rugged charm, Kingman has never quite shaken its frontier feel. The streets of downtown hold on to their Old West roots. Neon signs flicker above mom-and-pop motels. The wind kicks dust through alleys that seem unchanged since the 1950s. But just a few miles out, where the pavement ends and the landscape turns wild again, you'll find something far more unsettling than forgotten ghost towns or crumbling train depots. Slaughterhouse Canyon. A name that sounds like the setup to a horror movie. But this place, and the legend tied to it, has been around for generations, and is far from a tale spun up by some Hollywood writers. Once the sun sets behind the Black Mesas, and the desert cools to a breathless silence, what remains is something far less nostalgic. A canyon soaked in sorrow, a mother, her children, and a cry that never stops echoing. Slaughterhouse Canyon, also known by another name, Luana's Canyon, lies just south of Kingman, tucked into an unassuming stretch of desert brush and red rock. It isn't a tourist destination. You won't find signs or markers. Most people only find it if they're looking for it, or if they were warned not to. The legend attached to this canyon dates back to the 1800s, though there's no known newspaper article or official document tied to the events. Still, the story has lingered in oral tradition, passed down like a whisper at the edge of a campfire. It begins with a family, an unnamed husband, wife, and several children, living in a modest wooden cabin at the mouth of the canyon. The father, a prospector by trade, would leave for long stretches, searching for work or panning for gold. In this version of the frontier, isolation wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous, especially when the supply lines dried up. But one season, he left and never returned. Whether he died on the trail, was murdered by bandits, or abandoned them is unknown. What is known, or at least retold, is that his family waited. Days turned to weeks. Food grew scarce, then vanished altogether. With no money and no way to reach help, the mother, Luana in some versions, tried to keep her children alive. But in the punishing heat and dust of the high desert, hunger has a way of unraveling the mind. According to the legend, her children were starving to death, a slow and brutal way to die. Upon seeing this over the course of several days, something in her broke. In a moment of madness, or perhaps mercy, she either murdered them to end their suffering, or was unable to save them from their fate, and buried their bodies beside the creek bed. They say she wandered the canyon in her nightgown, covered in blood, screaming and sobbing until her own body gave out. When people eventually found her, if they ever did, she was either already dead or had simply disappeared into the land. But her spirit, well, her spirit never left. There are dozens of first-hand accounts, some from campers, some from curious locals, who claim to have heard her cries echoing across the canyon. Some say it starts soft, almost like a breeze winding through the rocks. Then it grows, a moaning sound, like someone crying for help but never finishing the sentence. Others say they've heard the sound of children weeping when there's no one else around. There are no recorded deaths in the area, no official crime scene to investigate. But hikers report strange sensations, the feeling of being watched, heavy pressure on the chest, or sudden disorientation when walking through the area. There are even claims of seeing a figure in white moving quickly between the rocks, always just out of reach. Some who've dared to visit the canyon at night walk away shaken, unsure of what they heard, or if they were ever truly alone. One visitor shared their experience on ArizonaHauntedHouses.com, recalling a teenage memory that still gives them chills.
As a teen growing up in Kingman, we all heard the stories of Slaughterhouse Canyon. My brother and I would go out to have bonfires and be hooligans. One night, only a minute after midnight, we heard what sounded like a wailing cry echo all around us. We looked around for about half an hour before deciding to go home.
It's a perfect summary of how these legends stay alive, not through books or history classes, but through those quiet, eerie moments that wedge themselves into memory. Especially when multiple people hear the same sound, and no one wants to admit what they think it was. Slaughterhouse Canyon may not have any plaques or preserved foundations, but the story that clings to it is harder to erase. Whether you call it folklore, trauma, or something else entirely, the tale of Luana and her children continues to echo down the canyon walls, and perhaps through the people who still live nearby. The silence in that desert doesn't always stay silent. Thanks for joining me for this episode of City of Nightmares. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to leave a review and follow so you never miss an episode. New stories drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Next time, we'll be heading to Honolulu, Hawaii, where the sun-kissed beaches hide a much darker truth. A serial killer that stalked the streets for years. Until then, I'm your host, Dan David, reminding you all to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next episode.